Hey everybody, so we're here. It's the day of days, Bestiary of Blood, our release day, and I have some amazing, distinguished guests to talk about the book with you guys today. It's my honor, it's with great gratitude and respect that I introduce the great Jonathan Maberry
Hey, guys.
and the great Linda D. Addison herself. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know who these people are, I'm going to briefly annoy them by, running down their bios a little bit. So we'll start with Jonathan. Jonathan Maberry is a New York Times bestselling author, known for his work in the horror and science fiction genres. He's a 5-time Bram Stoker Award winner, 4-time Scribe Award winner, Inkpot Award winner, and comic book writer. He's the author of 51 novels, 170 short stories, 14 nonfiction books, 28 graphic novels, 16 short story collections, and more than 1,200 feature articles. Maberry is recognized for his novels, including Necrotech. I love Necrotech, by the way, and Kagan, amazing books. And is the creator of the V-War series, which has been adapted into a Netflix series. In addition to his novel, he has worked as a comic book writer for various publishers. I know, especially the Black Panther stuff, some of the critical things on that. He is obviously a very extremely lazy person, obviously.
I've got to cultivate a work ethic at some point. I really do.
No, it's amazing. And of course, Grandmaster Linda D. Addison is an award-winning author of 5 collections, including The Place of Broken Things, written with Alessandro Manzetti, and How to Recognize a Demon Has Become Your Friend. She has been honored with the HWA Lifetime Achievement Member Award, HWA Mentor of the Year, and SFPA Grandmaster Fantastic Poetry. She's a member of SIF, HWA, SFWA, SFPA, and IAMTW. Find her in anthologies: Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, Predator, Eyes of the Demon, Chiral Mad 5, Writing Poetry in the Dark, Shakespeare Unleashed, and many more. And she's also my mentor. So, Linda D. Addison, Jonathan Maberry, amazing. I'm Jamal Hodge. I'm just some guy that edited a book.
Don't even say that like that. You know more than that. You done broke some windows too. You done broke some ceilings.
I'm also a writer, and I'm the editor of Bestiary of Blood, the book that came out today, where we have like 37 contributors. And some of the names that we have there, I'll just read them off because I want to honor them and how incredible they are to do this work. The book is basically Aesop's Fables meets Sounds of the Lambs meets to the Twilight Zone, I would say. So it's unique, it's fun, and it's deep and surprisingly emotional. But of course, we have Linda Addison, we have Colleen Anderson, Eugene Bacon, another one of my mentors, Michael Bailey. We have Stephen Barnes. We have Rob Cameron. We have Wayne Felon. I love that name. He just sounds like a criminal a little bit. I love it. Jamie Flanagan, Genevieve Flynn, Maxwell Ian Gold. Shout out to Max. Oz Hardwick. If the author, my brother, Dominique Heck. The late Travis Iman, rest in peace. We have Akua Leslie Hope, Grandmaster, Jeffrey Howe, E.V. Knight, the great Alessandro Manzetti, Evan Martin III, L.H. Moore, the great Lisa Morton, the great Lee Murray, and then Zandi, Cynthia Paleo, my heart sister, Cindy O'Quinn, Kumbala Satori, the great Mar Simon, Angela Yuriko Smith, John Skip, who came out of retirement to make this happen, Christina Singh, Melanie Strom, Sarah Tattlinger, Patrick Thompson, Stephen Van Patten, Tim Wagner himself, and of course, Ralph James White. So that's our incredible lineup for this incredible anthology that only took a couple of years to make. 2 long years. But here we are today. So I just would like to start off, Jonathan, you wrote the foreword to the book. Linda, you wrote one of the most powerful stories in the book and a very personal story. So I just wanted to start off, Jonathan, how do you feel about what you read?
Well, geez. First off, it's an incredible book. It's the kind of anthology I would grab anyway, even if I didn't know you guys. I would just grab this kind of book. What it does, it speaks to the origins of storytelling, the shorter, more essential types of stories that get right to the heart of an issue, but don't clobber you over the head with a lesson. There's a lot in there. There's a lot to learn in there. There's a lot of things to consider in there. But they approached all the story. Each writers approach their stories and their poems with a sense of the, in this case, dark joy of writing, of being able to convey a complex idea in a few words, which is a very brilliant thing, and also the kind of simplicity, almost like a false simplicity in Fables, where they appear to be such a simple little thing, and yet there are layers you can peel back. And I know a lot of these stories are going to be ones that people can revisit over and over again, and the poems too, revisit over and over again and get a different meaning as they progress through their own lives, because we are different people at different phases of our lives, which means that when we read something, like we read a poem, we're going to have a different context for it. So the stuff in here is so good, and it's so varied that this is a book that has the evergreen quality. You can come back to it and keep finding more and more, even if you've already read it. That's what makes a book like this so powerful and so useful to the readers. It's also a really good book to give to folks who don't know what horror really is, or they think they know, because most people equate horror with just one thing, whether it's splatterpunk or a ghost story, but this covers all of them. And it's not hit you over the head horror. It's, lean forward and let me tell you something horror. And that's what makes it brilliant. So I'm a huge fan. I would have been a big fan of this book. I said, even if I hadn't been invited to write the foreword, I would have been a big fan of this book, because it's exactly the kind of book our genre needs and our reading public really deserves.
Well, thank you for that. And Linda, what was your experience being a contributor to the book?
Yeah, you should smile when you ask that question, because you know what I went through. It was like a therapy session for me, stretched out over weeks and months. Anyone who's read my work knows that there's a lot of metaphor and images and things, but you would have to put more together to find. I went so deep for this story. I went to my childhood, the fear and pain that I felt in my childhood, the first 18 years growing up. And I could not have finished this story without Jamal. I mean, there were there were points where I just stopped, and he was like, "You sure?" I was like, "Yes, I just need a minute." There were points where I was feeling so physical about it, headache, nausea. But after all these years and having so much joy and beauty in my life, I really felt ready to come and face the concept of what I wanted to do with this story. I chose dolphins because people think dolphins are these little smiley things. Let me tell you, the notes I first took, because I had read a lot about dolphins, they are not smiley things. They do horrible things to each other. I mean, as a human, we would judge them as horror. This is their nature. And so I wanted to really, the overarching concept of what I wrote is the terrible things that humans do to humans, especially children. But I did it through the concept of the twin stars, because I'm kind of obsessed with twins. I don't even know why. The idea of it, and dolphins. So in order to really make the story what I wanted it to be and more what Jamal wanted to be, because there were points where he was like, Linda, let's make this more like a story. I was like, okay. We had to do a lot of work to get to where it is now, but I don't even know what words to say about how I feel about this story. It's more than proud. It's like a part of me that I pulled out slowly and weaved into a fable. And so I'm really, really so proud of it. And again, I couldn't have done it without Jamal's patience and apparently therapy things that he had that I didn't know.
Well, I mean, your story spoke to my own childhood and the suffering that I went through. And that's what I loved about it. I feel like it's going to speak pain to healing in a lot of people who've either been abused or suffered a lot as young people. And that's the thing about this book that's special about so many of the stories in there, even the story from, you know, Michael Bailey's story or Tim Wagner's story. There's a lot of healing in this book. It's not only people think horror is just like Jonathan was saying, it's just like a platform for splatterpunk or fear and stuff. But I think you can also show in horror how to confront fears, how to overcome fears, how to transcend fears. So I felt like your story definitely does all of that.
It did.
If I can just throw something in on that too. One of the things I love about your story, Linda, and quite a few of the stories in there, I know a lot of the writers, and I know how many of us, three of us and others, had been through some real storms as children and as adults. And some people take that kind of thing and it turns to hate, or it turns to bitterness, or it turns to stepping away from society. But writers, especially the horror writers, we tend to take something like that and use it as fuel to tell the story, not to punish the reader for reading it, which I've seen stories that do that, but to use the metaphor, use the allegory, use the motif and subtext to be able to explore what we've been through without it being a directly confessional work. And Linda's story talks about pain, but she gives it to other characters, so that we can explore it that way. And as a result, it makes it more accessible to a wider number of readers. Instead of just the reader that identifies with Linda, or the reader identifies with me, or identifies with you, any reader can read that story and read it as a story, but also unpack it.
Yeah.
And anyone who has damage that they may not have addressed, they can read something like this and realize that their experiences, their pain they went through, even though it may have been solitary as a child, they're not alone in that. And there are a lot of stories in here that take real courage to write and courage to read, but that courage is also a bridge to understanding. So I'm absolutely blown away.
Well, thank you. I think that's true of all of it. In particular, as I said, this story, I put it aside and reread it, and then I was so I don't know if happy is the right word or joyful, but I felt so good about the solidness of it, the way it was told with the twin stars and this myth, because it is a fable. I wanted it to be a fable, but and it was worth every second. I don't know if we ever clocked
Every second.
it was a lot of time, Jamal. I can click with you, but it was worth it, and I'm just like joyful to even be part of the project and to have been able to create something like this. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for your words. I'm wearing a shirt, by the way, folks who don't know. I'm wearing this for Jonathan. This is my Hawaiian car shirt.
Awesome. Richard Matheson told me when I was I think it was 14 that writing anything of horror is worth at least 6 months of good therapy. He said that he got so much,
Jonathan.
yeah, he got so much out of writing I Am Legend and some of his other works that he felt he didn't need a therapist anymore.
Honestly, that is the truth. I
That's
feel
so
like I
true.
washed out so much stuff going through this. Wow.
I was just gonna say, like, this is like the perfect segue to ask if you can give us a little sample from your story, Linda, if you didn't mind reading it.
Sure. I love to read. And again, as I said, the fable involves dolphins and the concept of the twin stars coming to Earth with message. The title, The Tale of the Twin Stars, Born of Earth and Sea. It begins with a little poem, so I'll read that part. Telling the way of how first dolphins came to be. It is said stars fell from the heavens to earth, into oceans, becoming slick, smirking movements, telling the way of why sirens came into tales. It is said dolphin song entered flawed human minds through points of madness, shredding broken souls, telling the way of when twin stars would arrive. It is said one day Leda's immortal twins would return from the left of Orion to Earth, telling the way of what this means to Earthwalkers. It is said when the twin stars are reborn, the reckoning will come, small, then large. Under a clear night sky full of stars, a pregnant bottlenose dolphin swims away from the pod. Contractions pulse strong and fast, so she seeks a calm place to give birth. She softly whistles her name to the calf inside. Floating near the surface of the water, she pushes. The calf's tail presents first. The dolphin bounces to the surface, takes a deep breath, and pushes until the rest of the baby is out and the umbilical cord snaps. She nudges the calf to the surface for its first breath. The mother bobs up and down with the baby on her back. They don't see the large male dolphin rush up from under them and butt the mother. As she rolls over, he grabs the calf by its tail and swims deep into the water. She tries to follow, but the pain of being hit and weakness from giving birth slows her down. The newborn dolphin's body slowly floats up to her. And no matter how many times she pushes it to the surface, it doesn't move or breathe. As harsh as this sounds, it is the way of some dolphins. In a field away from the city, a child lies on its back in a ditch of soft soil. She looks up at the bright stars in the night sky and tries to reach for the points of light, but is too weak to raise her arms. As soil piles on her like sand on a beach, a cough brings up blood and a last breath from ribs kicked in and collapsed lungs. Her eyes don't blink as dirt cover her face. As horrible as this sounds, it is the cruel way of too many humans. So that's the opening.
Yeah, that's heavy. You feel it.
Oh,
Yeah. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. Beautiful and horrifying and true all at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, phenomenal.
the feel
Yeah.
good,
Now,
you know,
sorry,
feel
Justin.
good story of the year too. But it does speak to the fact that fables aren't all, happy bunnies.
Yeah, yeah. It's a darker spin on Aesop, right? Combining like Aesop in a horror space. The idea behind that, from my perspective, was that, like you were saying, Jonathan, and what you were saying, Linda, about how horror lends itself to a certain type of honesty that it's hard to get in other genres. I felt like, so I wanted to see people, and how like a lot of horror writers, they have really compassionate hearts because a lot of them come from suffering, so they didn't want other people to really feel the way they felt. So this is just, what I noticed in my opinion. And what I felt like was that if you take people like that who can confront the darkest aspects of life, but have a heart of compassion, and you tell them to write morality tales, the things that they'll come up with will be both light and dark, which will give a holistic truth or authenticity
All right.
to the stories. So, in terms of writers, horror writers writing morality tales, what do you guys feel is either special or unique about that?
I think for creators in general, we are reflective, whether it's writing or creating art out of stone or wood or anything. We tend to be reflective of not just our life, but our interaction with the society and seeing that reflection in society. I did a lot of reading about how children around the world in different countries are suffering. So for someone to write in horror, I think we do not just what, and both of you have said this, not just looking at the pain that we may have felt or we see in the world that we can still feel because of empathy, but we also want to express it in a way that brings something to people to let them feel something. And we don't, I mean, there are so many different kinds of horror. For me, the area of psychological horror is very comforting because I like to do that reflection in a way that makes someone read something, feel something, and I don't know what that feeling is going to be. I don't know what they're going to connect to. And I think for a lot of writers, and Jonathan's the master of creation of so much work. That's the idea, is to tell a story that entertains, that draws you in, but also makes you feel something, whatever that feeling is. And it's very important. It's very satisfying to know that we can do this. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and and what I'm about to say is not an attack on any other genre, but like thriller writers and mystery writers a lot of them tend to be people who are writing based on their profession. Lawyers, doctors, and so on write medical thrillers and legal thrillers and so on. A lot of ex-cops or investigators write mysteries, and there are people who write in that genre who are not that profession, but kind of lean into it. In science fiction, it tends to be more research driven. Uh, but there's something about horror and horror writing that is far more personal than almost than any other genre I can imagine, um, because we write from what makes us afraid. That's why we're drawn to it. Because like I remember as a kid, I grew up as an abused kid in a tough household, and I would see stories, watch movies, read books where the character is not any smarter or more capable than I am, and they're facing apparently impossible odds, and somehow they have to level up to understand it. It's an encouragement to understand, to deepen your personal knowledge, not to find a resource, not to call a cop, but like you don't call a cop for psychological horror. You have to find that agency within yourself. You don't call a cop for a haunting. You don't get a lawyer to evict a ghost. So when we write about the supernatural, we are really writing about what scares us, which makes it intensely personal. But at the same time, we realize that we're not the only person scared of that thing. So it encourages a cultivation of empathy to the point where it becomes a superpower. And it's weird because I belong to the horror writers, the mystery writers, the thriller writers, and so on. I am most at home in the horror writers company, in that group, within the community, because more of them have looked in. And I'm not saying it's completely unflinching, but they look in, because if they didn't look in, they can't write and share with any real honesty, and that is deep in honesty. And I find horror to be a great vehicle for the kind and compassionate mind to explore things, of dangerous things, and share them in a way that other people can relate to and say, you know what, this is terrifying, but it's also real, and it also shows that I'm not alone in this. It also shows that maybe there's a solution to it, a response to it, a way to be able to deal with these things. Um, I think actually the horror community is also the most emotionally well balanced group of writers I know. They're family oriented. They're we don't walk around being, saying horrible things to one another. We're kind to one another. And I think that's part of it because we're all in kind of a career therapy um, with what we write. And anyone who reads our work probably, gets a better insight into us than they would reading a science fiction novel by Isaac Asimov. We don't, we know he's a scientist, but we don't know him personally. You read Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, you know something about Shirley Jackson. You understand what makes her afraid. And that's what horror does. It is a conversation more than a story sold.
And I also wanted to just add real quick that part of why I think readers are drawn to reading horror is because it's a safe place to be scared.
Mhm.
You can stop the movie if you watch it in your home, or you can close the book and put it down and come back to it later. Whereas with real horror that happens in your home, on the street, in the world, it's a lot harder to deal with how to set up a safe place with that. In fact, you don't feel very safe often. But with the work that's done visually or in books or anything else like that, it's more like a wash through, like, oh, I'm scared and now I'm gonna be fine. So it's a very I think it's a very comforting place, and that's why people like reading it.
Yeah, and also horror allows us to write a better third act than life often provides for us. Actually,
You said that right.
Absolutely.
Woo.
So all that being said, applying it back to Bestiary of Blood, why should someone pick up this book in both of your opinions? Like what makes, I mean, you kind of alluded to some of it early on, Jonathan, but if you had to sell somebody on this book, what would you tell them?
well, I'll tell you what I told a friend of mine yesterday. If you want to see the full range of what horror does, and the full range of what can be uh, showcased in terms of talent and storytelling ability, this book is does that. Allows you to have such a variety of storytelling styles, such a variety of insights, of different pathways to insight, that it's the kind of book that if somebody picks it up who doesn't really understand horror and its power and horror storytelling and its healing grace, this book will do it. I mean, it's not just a collection of stories and poems. You actually went a mile further with it, and your contributors did, to create something that is also of use to people.
Yeah, I think and I've mentioned this to people, is that, we all grew up with fables, when we were kids in school. And this is fables for grown-ups, just like the title says. But I mean, each person, and I want some conversation on you picking, deciding to pick animals and stuff for this, Jamal. I need an explanation. You need to explain. But anyway, what I think is wonderful about the fact that each story is from a different creature's point of view, non-human, is that, some of them are fun, some of them are funny. Even the message is kind of like, makes you smile and makes you think about it in that way. And some sit and make you think in a different kind of way. I mean, there's something in that way for everyone. Some of them are like, they got like a little street thing going on in this story. And, it's just a wonderful, and I'm just probably saying what Jonathan said already, a wonderful mix of, humor, light humor to real life, not humor. But in a way, I mean, I like to think my story still has an ending that is satisfying in its concept. And so it's just a mix of everything that you ever grew up with when you were a kid, but you're grown now, so you can read the grown-up stuff and smile and laugh and sit and think about.
Yeah, this book is definitely not for kids. Like, oh, a book of fables. Give it to little Timmy. Like, here, Ralph James White.
Unless you want to make a horror writer out of them, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
in terms of
It would be training for a horror writer.
But and Jamal, one of the fun things about your book, and one of the reasons I say it's a useful book, is that the stories are written so that to take a note off of Linda, that you can feel safe reading them. The stories themselves are not safe, but the writer has your back, and they're not trying to hurt you with the story. And that is not always true in horror anthology. Sometimes you get some have kind of a mean spirit, and this doesn't. It has a playful spirit, but the playground is all kids who have been through some shit.
Yes.
And that is a whole different approach to telling edgy stories, so that it's safe because the writing is that good and the guidance of the writer is sure, but not safe in some of what is explored in the story, as with Linda's story, because that one friggin' near broke me. Holy crap.
Yeah.
I see dolphins every day. I live at the beach. Now I'm like, you bastards, totally different way.
Oh my God, that's another word I need to put on my resume. I almost broke Jonathan Maberry. I also learned something about creatures that I never even knew about. Like, did you give everyone a total list, or did some people come to you with like, I want to do this thing that I, Linda, have never heard of before?
Some people ask. I tried to work with each writer intimately, like, you know what I mean. So I spoke to them and tried to find out what resonated with them. If it was already taken, then I would try to present other options. So because we didn't need a lot of the same animal, a lot of people came back. I would make a suggestion, but then they will come back with something that spoke to them,
Mm,
and it only spoke to them. Nobody else had mentioned that animal. So I found that
mm,
very interesting, almost like without knowing it, we have a connection to the certain other life forms, just inherently. So it's interesting. And then the themes that started manifesting and taking shape. And I was like, oh, this is what this book wants to be. Because there's something magical and spiritual about animals inherently. And they kind of soften the blow of some of the darkness, that if it was all just humans, you know what I mean, some of the stories would be like Jonathan was saying, probably like death worship or mean spirited. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that you have animals, and what animals represent to us, different types of animals, like a hawk flying for the stars, that's we're all doing the same thing where we're pursuing our dreams, right? So it's like it's a built-in metaphor for our own lives. And the secret to the book, there is a major narrative going on, hidden in all the stories, where it's actually about humanity, the whole story, the whole thing. So, it seems like it's about animals and stuff like that, but it's actually about humanity, and it's actually about you, the reader, at the end of the day. So that's what I was doing.
With Linda, with your dolphin story, that's a good example of why nature is such a great springboard for storytelling. And I'm really glad you did this, Jamal, because we have a skewed view of nature, especially those of us who grew up in cities. You know,
Yes.
Dolphins are cute and cool. Hummingbirds are wonderful. They just take nectar. Hummingbirds mostly eat spiders. A lot of people don't know that they're predators. They
Yeah.
eat spiders. So you could tell a hummingbird story in a book like this, and have it come out as a horror story, or as an adventure story, or as a predator story, depending on point of view. That's the beauty of taking animals, because the natural world is not a peaceful kingdom. It is a
Hmm.
balanced kingdom, but it's not peaceful.
That's
And
right.
balance takes away good and evil and makes it positive and negative. And a lot of these stories took that note, where this is what the natural world is. I mean, the opening that Linda read of her story, that male dolphin is a bad guy, but he's not. It's kind of like what Chris Rock said about the Vegas performer who got bitten by the lion, or the tiger rather. People were saying the tiger went crazy, and Chris said no, the tiger went tiger. It's going dolphin. The grief, the predation, and all of that, the heartbreak, is part of the natural world. And there are lessons we can all learn from the natural world, because the natural world isn't what we think it is. It's what we should understand in order to understand our own nature, because we're a predator species too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yet we aspire to art and beauty.
Absolutely. I mean, I learned a lot reading other people's stories about uh, life forms on this planet that I didn't even think about. I mean, dolphins I knew because I had read about them, and I had like I have like a picture of the first notes I made, just summarizing. I have like a 30-page document of notes on dolphins because I wanted to make everything exact. I mean, that's just how I am. That's like I don't know what part of my nonfiction brain is. I need, if I'm saying everything I just said in that little reading I did of her reaction, the mother, and everything, how she gets, all that's real, all that's real stuff. And so when I was reading other people's story, I was like, what? What is this? And I'm going and I'm looking stuff up, and it's like a fascinating journey in a way, even for bugs that I do think I know. Not just bugs, but I mean creatures that I do think I know. It was a fun thing to go look up some of that stuff.
Jamal, I have a question for you. She asked, about the animals and some. Why? I mean, I love poetry. I read it every day before I write my prose. But a lot of anthologies go as far as they can go to not include poetry, and yet you brought poetry in force. Why?
Well, one of the, I would say, the prince of the modern anthology, Michael Bailey. Uh, shout out to Michael. I saw in a lot of his works how that the impact of that, and then I also feel like there's a certain way you can deliver a story in a poem that you can't in a short story or even in a novel. Yeah, I feel like the form of poetry, it kind of gets past your conscious mind and it gets right into your subconscious, your emotional body, you know? So it bypasses a lot of times, it just allows you to feel, and to engage your imagination in a different way. And I felt like so many things in life we think we understand, but then we see it, we feel the magic of it. Like the first time you meet a horse, right? Or you first time you see a horse close up. There's a certain magic to that, or a big cat, or just seeing a eagle take off. It's like, oh yeah, I know eagles fly at this amount but that's just information in your conscious mind. Like when you really experience it, it's different. And I feel like poetry is like that. Like I feel like, so I wanted to include a poetic experience like that so that there's an emotional rhythm throughout the entire book, you know. So
And
that's
and
it.
and just real quick from an editor's point of view, because I edit anthologies, I've done 26 of them now, and there is an art to laying out the book into what comes first and what comes next and the order they go in. Looking through the book, this is one of those embarrassing things to say, but most editors look at other editors' anthologies and say, "Would I have done it this way?" And I would hope I would have done it this way.
No, that's too high praise to me. Thank you, sir.
It's a real damn good book.
No, we've talked about this too, Jamal. I mean, I've done, first of all, shout out to Jonathan because he has always pulled poetry into his anthologies. And
Yes.
I love, love, love that you do that, Jonathan. And I think, didn't I just see you sold a poem somewhere? You got a poem coming out somewhere?
So I've had poems published, but in my own short story collections and so on. So this was me taking a risk to just actually submit a poem somewhere. And
I mean, that is not an easy one, baby. They wouldn't have accepted you just because you Jonathan. I know that for
well,
sure.
it just shows what threats and bribes can accomplish. It's a
Well, yeah, I have
well,
read your, I've read your work. You do quite well.
I'm a big fan of poetry. I have a poetry anthology of my own coming out this Sunday,
Amazing.
or Saturday, rather tomorrow. But poetry is one of those grossly marginalized things here in the United States. It's great, like go to France and trip over poets everywhere you go. Here, people are almost afraid to say they're poets. And yet books like this celebrate poetry. And also you're seeing people who we may know from the prose world who have the poetic side that now they're allowed to let out. And a book like this, it encourages more poets, especially those who explore darker things with poetry, to say, hey, I've got something, or maybe I'll submit something. And it also gives readers a chance who don't read poetry. Here's a reading list of poets. Go
Yeah.
read, you know. Go read Linda. Go read Alessandro and Marge Simon and so. Go read your poetry, Jamal. I mean, it's now an open door for that to be part of the next phase of conversation. So, yay.
Well, you've been part of opening that door, and I appreciate it because you've always included it in weird tales also. So I wanted to make like highlight that because I was so happy. I mean, I didn't have nothing to do with mentoring you, Jonathan, but when I saw you got in, I was like, yes.
Well,
Anyway,
you've given me good advice over the years. I sent a couple of poems to you, not knowing whether they were even worth publishing, and you had some nice things to say about them, and I'm like, holy crap, I didn't expect that. Uh,
okay, you're
and
welcome.
yeah, yeah, and thank you, and that's again one of the things I love about the book is poetry is front and center in it. And also longer and shorter versions of short works. I mean, you can see that it doesn't have to be always a 5,000 or 7,500 word short story. There are some brief pieces here that are more, structured like fables. That
Like Ganesha's child from Marsh Simon is one of them.
yeah, and you read it and like, holy crap, you see how poetry and prose are two hands on the same body.
Exactly.
Mm.
Because one of the things that I was trying to do with this anthology was kind of have it reflect nature, like the diversity in nature,
Oh yeah, it does.
how it all creates a collective harmony. Like you were saying, there's negative and positive. There's not necessarily good or evil. It's just negative and positive, but they come together to form a harmony. And so I went out of my way to make sure that we got a really diverse group of people. It's a very diverse list of contributors,
It is.
like people who normally wouldn't overlap in certain, because it's like even in horror, there's different cliques, so to speak. And in this book, people definitely, all the worlds overlap, and it creates like this beautiful harmony.
Yeah, I have one thing to say about that too, because when you see a book with a diverse list of writers, um, in this day and age, sometimes you're afraid that some of it's stunt casting, or somebody's just brought in someone so that they can say they have, someone of this gender or this ethnic background, but there's none of the trickery
Yeah.
of that in this. You collected good voices, you collected powerful voices. The fact that it's also diverse makes a statement without having to make the statement. I mean, the world is diverse, art is diverse, creativity is diverse, experience, pain is diverse.
Yep.
And because it's so diverse, that means it's all included. It's all us.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be promoting this book pretty heavily with my friends.
So Jamal, how in the world? How? Because you spent a lot of time with me. I mean, you got some serious editor um chops, Like how did you do that with this many stories, poems, putting them together? I know I'm not the only person that you went back and forth with. I mean, I don't know if I hope you have to go back and forth with some as much as you did with me, but how did you put this together? Because now in this final form, it's beautifully balanced. As Jonathan said, and I've said to people, the energy, the movement of it, you and I've talked about, not this in particular, but about the idea of putting an anthology together. It's like putting together a picture with pieces. You want to make sure all the pieces work, the energy work. I mean, how did you do that?
I probably give it away like a secret. I'm just starting to think, but I'm kind of a little bit crazy. So I
Yeah.
kind of think of everything as music. Eventually I bring everything. I just think that everything in life is some sort of midpoint between math and music, right? So I'm always trying to find the music and the math in the thing. So eventually I will read the story so much that it will just become a note in my brain. And then I will combine those notes into a symphony. And I would just kind of try to see how the beats in that story flow, because there's so much symbolism and meaning in each story, but some of them organically blend into each other the idea of similar rhythms or notes. But sometimes you could put people in a lull and then you want to, just hit them. So you'll have like a jarring story come out that breaks that rhythm and it starts a new one. So that's how I was kind of like looking at it. And then I also, I think being a filmmaker helps. Like being a director is very similar to being an editor in some ways. Obviously, the different skills, but the thing that's similar about it is that it only works if you really love or really hate people. So that's the thing about it. So for me, I really, I'm a big dude. I'm a tough guy. Sometimes, people might say that, but I generally love artists. I love people I think there's nothing more beautiful than people who've suffered and overcome it and learn how to transmute their pain into something useful to heal others. So like I love that. So to me, it gives me so much energy and commitment when I see people entrust me with that part of themselves. You know what I mean? So I basically was just being a lunatic fanatic over the last year and a half with each of these stories and just having them live in me and within me and turning them into music and then putting them together to find the song.
Cool.
Nice.
That it's that's its own point. That description. Yeah.
So
Makes seeing how, as Jonathan said, the long and short pieces, the poetry, everything just works together so beautifully. I was like, I mean, I've done anthologies. It's a lot of work. I couldn't imagine, as Jonathan said, I could not imagine trying to put something this big together because I've never done anything this large.
37 people in it, right?
yeah, 37.
You are. I mean that's a lot of people put in an anthology.
I just was ignorant. I didn't know any better, man. I was just like, I don't like all these people together. I'll never do that again.
Sometimes crazy works, though. Sometimes it's what it's not. It's not careful. It's not like overly cautious editing. It's you mentioned it like it's like a symphony, but to me, it comes off as improvisational jazz.
Yeah.
My brief explanation for that is regular jazz, it's melodies introduced, hands off to a different instrument. It's going to play a variation of that melody. Improvisational jazz, there is a melody of the song, and the theme of this is the main melody. Everybody has to come back to, but where they go when you hand it off to each individual writer is completely different from what everyone else is doing. Nobody's copying anything. Nobody's trying to hew too closely to the theme. The theme is there and the stories wrap around it, but it's like listening to improvisational jazz. And as a result, because each writer is doing something unexpected and different, you can't like put it in the background of your mind. You got to stay active with it. Isn't it? This has that thing where because everyone's doing something different, you're paying a lot more attention to this anthology than you might with another one. It's just one theme throughout. This is Fables are not a single theme. They're like so many manifestations, and this is a fun book.
Well, I mean, if you have any like final statements, we're almost at our end. We got about 6 more minutes. Anything you guys want to say? Blended?
Wait a minute, I just wanted to show something. I like to show stuff. Oh,
Yeah.
look, what's on my Kindle? Oh, how'd that happen?
Nice. Nice.
All I can say is go buy it. Come on now. And Jonathan, do at least mention that poetry thing you're putting out because it's for such a good cause. But yeah, go buy this now.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to give a slight plug since she has. I've got a book called Shadows and Verse coming out on.
Awesome.
It's actually coming out in a week, but we're debuting it tomorrow at a bookstore in Encinitas. It's 90 of my professional friends picking poems about darkness that are in the public domain and then writing commentary on it. So the book is all, classic poems dealing with darkness, commentary from everyone from R.L. Stein to Shane Black to everybody. I mean, just incredible. Linda is in there. A lot of my friends, Mart Simon is in there. Well, actually, quite a few of your contributors are in there. Had I known you better when I was doing this, you'd have been in there. And 100%.
Well, here now, man. I'm down for whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, you'll be hearing from me. Don't worry about that. But 100% of the proceeds benefit scholarships for creatives. The first round will go to scholarships for the Superstars Writing Seminars in Colorado Springs. It is founded by Jim Butcher and Kevin J. Anderson and Brandon Sanderson, and it's a conference that deals exclusively with indie and traditional writers in the business sector, how they get paid and how they build careers. So thank you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to mention this, but it's poetry, and I am such a big fan of poetry, and now I've got brand new poems to play with Bestiary Blood. So yay!
Well, we have something really great. I'm just gonna say, for something after Bestiary Blood, the next thing I have is a collaboration with Grandmaster Linda Addison herself. So, and it's called Everything Endless, and that will be coming out next year.
Nice.
And yeah, it's a cosmic. It's the ultimate form of what we was talking about, what poetry does.
Oh, awesome.
So dwarf poems mainly that unleash grand concepts and perspective shifts in the subconscious and conscious mind.
And the inner and outer journey. Humans always adding some darkness to the light, and then the stars adding the light.
But I would say, guys, this has been one of the great honors of my career thus far. Getting to talk with both of you guys, I'm just got a lot of love for your work and for you as human beings. Nothing but respect. And this journey of Bestiary Blood, it really just is one thing to be an editor of it, but I felt like every writer that contributed to it changed me in some way with their stories. And I'm hoping that this book has the same impact on anybody who picks it up for the foreseeable future to come. So thank you so much. Thank you to all the contributors. Thank you to Crystal Lake Publishing. Thank you, Joe, for believing in this material. I know it was kind of weird when I was explaining it, but it made sense when it was done. So just thank you, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Everybody go get this book.
Yes, and don't skip over the forward because Jonathan wrote an essay on short stories. Read that, learn.
Thank you. But the content is amazing. So thank you, Jamal, and much respect for what you did here. Fantastic.